Alright everyone, we start off today with more poll analysis because I know that I'm doing this quite often, but it continues to mystify me when I look at just how unpopular Biden has become, how quickly he has become it. He's again, if we remember, over less than a year, he has suffered 2 of the top 10 single-month drops in presidential approval history, including inching out Bush post-Katrina for the number 1 spot. That was over the Afghanistan debacle. I think he slid into number 6 or number 7 more recently, back in September it was, mainly because of economic issues. But post-infrastructure deal, I had expected him to get a bounce. We now have a new round of polling. Most of the main firms have updated. Link in the description, archived, of course. Now keep in mind, I think virtually all of these are post-infrastructure deal passing, as approval kept falling. He's now approaching a 12-point gap. I'm looking at the RCP page. Almost a 12-point gap between his much higher disapproval and much lower approval. Disapproval now inching towards 54%. That is quite significant. And again, if you look at this trend line, you can visualize it. It shows no signs of stopping. I think that it is his approval is being slowly eked away at, mainly by inflation, shortages, joblessness, economic issues. This is what I said post-Afghanistan. Ultimately, he'd suffer a bigger long-term loss from economic issues, from that domestic side of things, and the border crisis, arguably. Certainly plays an outsized role near the border, and especially in Texas and Southern California, as it were. Can't imagine Arizona will be quite as in play as before. New Mexico could be, just saying. I don't think, the long term, the Afghanistan debacle just cemented in some people's minds that he's a failure. But then the tangible, sort of on the ground element is totally different. Tomorrow I'll be making a video about how Meme War 2 has begun. The proliferation of the I did that, let's go Brandon sort of mimetic attack thing has created a new meme war, and not just one that's online. Now keep in mind, down below there will be a pinned comment on YouTube with links to now 5 video hosting sites. I've re-added Dailymotion. I did decide to do that after conducting a poll. And keep in mind, I make several exclusive videos every single day. They go on those sites. They don't go on YouTube. Now with Dailymotion, I won't put the book videos on there. Their system is persnickety about any Amazon links. Doesn't even matter what they link to, even for the purposes of talking about your own literature. So I'm just going to say fuck it. But all the political stuff will be there, all the exclusives as well. I realize that it's not technically new tech. In fact, it's technically older than YouTube, that they are a stable site. I'm one of their largest users already, so and why not strike while the iron's hot? I took a 6-month break, or almost, and said, well, it is a good site. I'm not getting any ad revenue from their new system. I don't see the problem. There's no hypocrisy or anything like that in there. I'm not taking a cent from Dailymotion. Anyway, looking at these numbers, looking especially at the disapproval. The approval numbers, I think, are less important. Those are more malleable. Once you've started to actively disapprove of a person, it's more difficult to pull them back than it is to lose someone that currently approves of you. Someone approves of you, you make a domestic decision they deeply disagree with, they switch to disapprove. Because they disapprove of you by and large based on whatever metric they're using for import, and I think, again, it's economic mostly here, how do you get them to approve of you? In this case, much of this loss, he can't re-win people that were really sour about Afghanistan unless he does something particularly monumental. The infrastructure bill apparently didn't do it. In fact, it looks like the steepness of the incline in his disapproval has slightly ticked up after the infrastructure bill was passed. Possibly because people are fickle and they're like, well, we passed the infrastructure bill. Why isn't inflation back down? Because they didn't properly explain what the bill is. It's 90% pork barrel bullshit. The way they tried to brand it sucked. The way they tried to brandon it sucked, as it were. Biden's not good at messaging. And then you don't have your VP to back you up. She's a no-show. You don't have Buttigieg, who at least has some notoriety. He's on paternal leave. You don't have anyone in your administration to really talk to the public and get your messaging out. So you pass this pork barrel bill to the tune of 1.4 trillion. You've at least pretended it'll be helpful. Half these people probably don't even know that it passed. Don't care. People are more focused on inflation and shortages and things of that nature. Biden is trying to claim that the shortage problem is getting better. Now, where have we heard this one before? Border crisis. Do you remember when Jen Psaki came out in March and said the situation's going to is improving rapidly, where we've got a handle on it? It's funny. You had a record number of October crossings for that month. Well, certainly it's gotten better. No, you just stopped detaining as many people. You just stopped trying. So you've got on paper, it looks like the problem's been solved. Same with these shipping containers at ports. They're unloading the containers and just driving them off to warehouses, and then that counts as alleviating pressure on the ships, but they still have to be shipped. They're still sitting there. It's just that they're on land instead of on a ship. That's really great for the shipping side of things. It's not really great for the trucking side of things. One golden lining, and not even a silver lining, is that a lot of that, the trucking should in time be able to compensate. Not saying how many months it'll take, probably a long time, because the OSHA has just backed off Biden's mandate. This, by the way, will actually help Biden's approval slightly long term. It'll hold down the rate of the increase of his disapproval, I think, at least some, if that had gone through. Especially right before the fucking Christmas holiday. Can you imagine the mayhem, the chaos, when Black Friday is literally like black and full of a dark winter sort of feel because there's nothing there to buy? Because of chronic shortages and even more demand? Can you imagine how that would have been? Oh, it would have been terrible. Yes, this Cyber Monday, you can buy the Chinese spyware app or the Chinese spyware app, because all the U.S. manufacturing went overseas, and the supply is throttled, and the Chinese paid us more to offload their ships first, so you've got to get their products. This sort of thing can, by the way, happen potentially. This polling is disastrous for Joe Biden. Keep in mind, of course, end of the year, first year, there's going to be a bunch of news and shit about, well, the first year of Beijing Biden's asterisk administration review, and it's all going to be negative. It's going to be, well, here's a top 10 list of things he could have done better. That's basically what the CNN headline will be. Moving on into the next year, there's no reason to believe, at least for the first entire half of the year, any economic problem will solve itself. And that means that we should continue to see this trajectory for several more months. Well, fuck, Biden might hit 60% disapproval at some point with a VP that is disastrously low in her approval. She's sub 30 already. A presidency hemorrhaging support. A lot of absentees who don't even have any experience, and they were basically put there for optics purposes or as, kickbacks for people who donated or campaign, with a carpet-bagged presidency, which, has an asterisk next to it on several levels. At what particular support point are you physically incapable of doing anything? And once you become incapable of doing anything, once you lack the latitude, the agency, and the energy to bother even trying to think big, how do you change the trajectory of the polling? See, it becomes a big problem, because once you lose that capability, you can no longer even prevent it from continuing off in that bad direction, thus sinking you to Jimmy Carter or post-Katrina W levels of support. I wouldn't be surprised if before the end of the year we see him sub 40 approval. Now with Trump, during his low approval level, and he had a fairly high floor in the upper 30s anyway that he really couldn't go below as far as approval because he had such a hardened base. I don't think Biden has anywhere near the hard support. His is probably closer to the teens because he's not charismatic. Doesn't have any hardened support really, other than Dem partisans who would never not support him just because of the letter after his name. I think that he's going to continue to get weighed down. I think he's going to continue to sink, and I think he's going to probably sometime early next year hit the point of no return, where it's no longer possible for him to even gain the support of enough of his own party to do anything. At which point the economic problem, because of stagnation and obstruction, will continue, and Joe Biden will not seek re-election. If anything, after the midterms, he might even call it quits if it's disastrous enough, because they're going to blame Biden. The Democrats in the legislature are stubbornly immune to autopsying their own problems. They'll do exactly like what happened after the disastrous elections a few weeks ago for Democrats. Well, it was basically just Terry McAuliffe and the Republicans lying about the critical race theory. Well, no, it wasn't. It goes far, far deeper than that and is far, far more complex. Only one race was affected by Terry McAuliffe. Only some of the races involved critical race theory. I think it was a big component overall of the loss of Dem support, the fact that you continue to glom onto this dying issue, but it's not the only thing that's happening. You've got low approval for the president, you get a border crisis, you get economic issues, shortages, all of these things. They don't want to autopsy all of these complex things. In order to be a liberal, you have to think very, very rudimentary and simple. Very verbose, but ultimately extreme surface level thinking. Otherwise, you wouldn't be a liberal. And I don't use that, by the way, to tar everyone who is a liberal. Liberal is a little bit different. When you get to the point where you're like, well, I will always vote for this party, no matter what, lesser of two evils, you're a liberal, because that's clearly not true. That'd be like if I said that with regards to the Republicans and never gave any hope that the Democrats would clean up their fucking act, actually field candidates that made sense for a while. I wish they would. I desperately wish that they would autopsy themselves, see why they're so self-destructive, but that's not happened yet, despite several disastrous losses in a row. When you've got a gap approaching 12. For Trump, it was because of wall of propaganda. With Biden, it's despite a wall of propaganda defending him. The legacy media only until the last few weeks refused to report anything negative about him. They still haven't talked about Ashley Biden's journal. They're still not, by and large, talking about the FBI overreach with regards to parents going to school board meetings or the Veritas raid itself. They're not touching the story with a 10-foot pole. They refuse to retract with regards to the Steele dossier. They refuse to discuss any of the scandals that are involving the Biden administration over the last year, or the Democrats at large over the last half a year. They don't touch them. They'd rather do fluff piece, topical coverage of what Biden could do better. You'll notice the phrasing is far different from, the 2016, 2017, 2018 period. You'll notice that the phrasing is like a CNN removed their coronavirus tracker. I wonder why they did that the second that Biden was elected. By the way, this is totally not obvious. That's about all. Peace out.